So let's chat data lifecycle and data retention. Okay, these are important topics you need to know. So first, let's talk about the data lifecycle. Now, you're going to see a lot of steps here, but I want you to know it's far more important to understand the data lifecycle than it is to memorize the steps. The data lifecycle begins when data are captured. Now, data can take all sorts of forms, right? It can be paper-based, it can be electronic. Let's use an example for this particular data lifecycle. Let's think about a cupcake shop that asks customers to fill out satisfaction surveys. So as soon as these surveys are filled out, we've captured some data. Now, what can we do with this data? By itself, it's meaningless, right? We have to make sense of it. We have to make use of it. So these are the steps we go through to get there. Data maintenance involves cleaning up the data to make it useful. So let's assume we've got 100 paper surveys. It doesn't do us much good. We can look through it and try to figure out what the averages are, but it's a lot easier to deal with this data if we can visualize it and put it in some kind of a format like a spreadsheet where we can make sense of the data. That's data maintenance, okay? Data synthesis is when we combine data to make new data. So for example, with this particular cupcake shop, maybe we can look at this survey and there are 3 or 4 questions that relate to people's user experience, right? If we can combine those items and come up with the satisfaction score, that's data synthesis. Data usage is actually using the data to support the company's goals. For instance, maybe these satisfaction forms include customers' email addresses. So I may use this data to send coupons to my customers to drum up business or increase customer loyalty. All right, now this is where it gets fun, data analytics. Data analytics involves trying to understand trends in our business. Now, I need to understand whether there are certain items, either internal or external to the business, that drive cupcake sales, either up or down. For instance, I may find out that whenever a certain employee works, customer satisfaction and sales are significantly higher. What can I do with this information? Well, if I know this, I'm going to do everything I can to keep this employee. I want to make sure that this person is promoted or at least gets a raise. I don't want them to go anywhere. Alternatively, I might find out that weather patterns or certain days of the week increase sales. What can I do with that information? Well, it can help me determine production. If I expect high production or high sales, I'm going to produce more, and vice versa, right? That keeps us from making too many cupcakes. It would improve kind of the freshness of our goods. It cuts down on the waste. This is useful information. Data publication involves making data available outside of an organization. Now, I don't want my competitors to know about my customer satisfaction scores or my sales records. But some information needs to go out, right? I need to file financial statements. The IRS or other tax authorities need to know how much I owe them. So I have to have some of this information published to external parties. Now, at some point, data is no longer useful. When we get to that point, we're going to archive it. As long as we're not actively using it, we're going to archive this data. But when it's archived, that means we still want access to it just in case. For instance, maybe we want to compare current satisfaction with records from 3 years ago to see how we're doing across time. And eventually, that data is no longer useful to us. And in this case, we would purge or permanently release the data. So that leads us to our discussion of a records retention policy. How long should we keep records within an organization? Now, first, we have to consider how useful old data is to us. This is going to vary by company. But so long as the data bring value to the company, we should probably keep it. There are also regulatory issues to consider. For instance, the government may require that tax records are maintained for a minimum amount of time. So, should I keep records indefinitely? Absolutely not. We have to balance the benefits of data retention with the costs. First, storage is very costly. Space is limited. And while hard drive space is cheaper than ever before, it's not free. Okay? Plus, there are costs associated with storing documents. Is it worth renting a warehouse to store records from 10 years ago? Probably not, but you have to make this decision on a company-by-company basis. Second, your company may face litigation at some point. It's bound to happen. The more records that are available to the opposition, the more likely it is that your company's data will be used against you. It's just the nature of the beast. We live in a very litigious environment. There are a lot of frivolous lawsuits, So having a records retention policy can protect you. Let's assume someone accuses your company of being involved in something 5 years ago. You may have to provide every document you have to opposing counsel. Even if you haven't done anything wrong, this can be very time-consuming and very expensive. Wouldn't it be nice to simply say, hey, you know what? We have a records retention policy. We shredded those documents according to that policy a couple of years ago. Yes, that would be great. Now, a quick note here. These policies must be written down. If they aren't written down and followed, then your company is going to be liable for destroying evidence. That is never good. Don't do that. So that's it. We've talked about the data lifecycle from start to finish, and we now understand the importance of having a good written records retention policy that we follow.